Imagine this. In the midst of a war-torn Europe, where the roar of battles echoed across continents, a silent killer stalked the streets of the Netherlands, not with guns or bombs, but with empty stomachs and frozen bones. Did you know that during the winter of 1944 to 1945, over 4.5 million people in the occupied Western Netherlands were plunged into a famine so severe that they resorted to grinding tulip bulbs into flour, boiling sugar beets for soup, and even scavenging grass from parks to stave off death? This was no natural disaster, no mere quirk of weather. It was a man-made catastrophe engineered through blockades and reprisals where daily rations plummeted to as low as 500 calories, barely enough to sustain life, let alone warmth in the harshest winter the region had seen in decades. Picture the scenes. Families huddled around flickering candles, their breath visible in the unheated rooms, as children, wide-eyed and skeletal, whispered pleas for food that never came. The canals, once bustling with trade, froze solid under a blanket of ice, turning pathways of hope into barriers of despair. Men and women, weakened by months of deprivation, trudged miles on foot or bicycle, their tires wrapped in rags for traction, in search of anything edible. Perhaps a farmer's hidden potato stash, or a black market trade that could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. The air carried the acrid smell of desperation, mingled with the faint, bitter scent of tulip bulbs being prepared as a last resort. "We ate the flowers of spring," one survivor later recalled, her voice trembling with the memory, because winter had stolen everything else. Commas marked the pauses in their labored breaths, each step a comma in a sentence of endurance. Yet, amid this horror, acts of quiet heroism emerged. Neighbors sharing a single loaf or volunteers organizing clandestine soup kitchens under the watchful eyes of occupiers. The famine claim lives indiscriminately. The elderly succumbed first, their bodies too frail to fight the cold and hunger. Men, often the breadwinners, collapsed from exhaustion. Even the young, whose futures should have been bright, faded into statistics. By March 1945, the deadliest month, bodies were collected from streets like fallen leaves, wrapped in whatever cloth could be spared. This was the hunger winter, a period when the very essence of humanity was tested, where the line between life and death blurred in the fog of starvation. It wasn't just about empty bellies, it was the erosion of spirit, the way hope dimmed like the shortening days. Families tore pages from books to burn for fleeting warmth, while the sound of distant artillery reminded them that liberation was near, yet so agonizingly out of reach. The wind howled through cracked windows, carrying whispers of rumors. Allied advances, possible aid drops, but reality was the gnawing pain in their guts. "How much longer can we hold on?" a father might have murmured to his wife as they divided a meager portion of beet pulp among their children. The famine's grip tightened with each passing week, turning vibrant cities into ghost towns of the living dead. Rivers and lakes iced over, halting barge deliveries that once brought sustenance. People experimented with recipes born of necessity: tulip bulb porridge, which caused stomach cramps but filled the void, or nettle soup, foraged from roadside ditches. The emotional toll was profound, mothers watching their infants waste away, unable to produce milk from their own starved bodies. Commas in their sobs, pauses in their prayers. This shocking reality forces us to confront. How does a modern society descend into such primal survival? The hunger winter stands as a stark reminder of war's hidden weapons, where famine becomes a tool of control, and civilians pay the ultimate price. As the snow blanketed the land, it buried not just the ground, but dreams and dignities, leaving scars that would echo through generations. The hunger winter's importance lies in its revelation of war's indirect devastations, showing how blockades and reprisals could weaponize hunger against civilians, leading to long-term health impacts studied even today, such as increased risks of diabetes and heart disease in survivors and their offspring. This event, unfolding in the final throes of World War II, highlighted the vulnerabilities of occupied populations and the ethical dilemmas of resistance versus survival. To understand its roots, we must rewind to the broader historical context of the Netherlands during the conflict. In May 1940, German forces invaded the neutral Netherlands, overwhelming its defenses in just 5 days, despite fierce resistance in places like Rotterdam, which was bombed into submission. The occupation began, with the Nazis installing a civilian administration under Arthur Seyss-Inquart, who enforced strict controls over resources and labor. For the first few years, food supplies remained relatively stable, thanks to rationing systems and imports, though black markets thrived amid growing shortages. By 1944, however, the tide of war had turned. Allied forces launched D-Day in June, pushing eastward through France and Belgium. In September, Operation Market Garden aimed to liberate the Netherlands swiftly. Airborne troops dropped to secure bridges over the Rhine, allowing ground forces to advance, but the operation faltered at Arnhem, where British paratroopers faced heavy German counterattacks, leading to its failure. This setback left the southern Netherlands partially liberated, but the densely populated west, home to cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague, remained under German control. In response to the Allied push and to disrupt German reinforcements, the Dutch government in exile, broadcasting from London, called for a nationwide railway strike on September 17, 1944. Some 30,000 railway workers complied, halting trains and crippling German logistics. Enraged, the occupiers retaliated with an embargo on food, transports to the western provinces, banning shipments by barge and rail for 6 weeks, starting in October. The strike was meant to aid liberation, a railway worker later noted in his diary, but it sealed our fate in hunger. Commas in the halting trains, pauses in the supply lines. Even after the ban lifted, transportation networks were in disarray. Allied bombings had damaged infrastructure, and the Germans requisitioned vehicles and fuel for their own needs. Compounding this, the harvest of 1944 was poor due to flooded farmlands from earlier breaches in dikes, and coal supplies from the liberated South couldn't reach the North because of frozen waterways. The winter itself was exceptionally severe, with temperatures dropping below freezing for weeks, icing over the Rhine, Meuse, and IJsselmeer, key arteries for barge traffic. By November, official rations in the West fell below 1,000 calories per day, far short of the 2,000 to 2,500 needed for adults. The population, already strained by 4 years of occupation, including forced labor deportations and the Holocaust toll on Jewish communities, faced a perfect storm. Urban areas, reliant on imports, suffered most, with 4.3 million people affected. Efforts to mitigate included Swedish and Swiss Red Cross shipments of bread and margarine, but these were insufficient and delayed. "We negotiated for every loaf," a relief organizer recalled, underscoring the bureaucratic hurdles. The famine's man-made nature stemmed from these punitive measures and logistical breakdowns, turning a potential quick liberation into months of agony. As December deepened the cold, fuel shortages meant no heat, no light. Gas and electricity were rationed or cut off entirely. People dismantled wooden structures for firewood, leading to further deprivations. This context set the stage for the unfolding tragedy, where civilian starvation became a grim chapter in the war's endgame, illustrating how strategic decisions rippled into humanitarian crises. November 1944 turned into December. The cold deepened relentlessly, and the blockade's effects struck like a slow, invisible blade. In Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht, rations had already shrunk to under 1,000 calories daily, but now they fell further, to around 600, then 400 calories by January. Families woke each morning to the same gnawing emptiness, the same question hanging in the frosty air. What can we eat today? People rose before dawn, wrapped in every layer they owned, coats, scarves, blankets sewn into capes, and set out on what became known as hunger treks. They pushed prams, pulled carts, or rode bicycles with tires patched, so many times they resembled rags more than rubber. Miles stretched into the countryside, toward farms where potatoes or vegetables might still be hidden. One survivor remembered the journey vividly. "We walked for hours, feet numb, trading a silver spoon for a handful of beets or a watch for a few potatoes." Commas marked the labored steps, pauses when someone collapsed by the roadside, too weak to continue. In the cities, soup kitchens sprang up, run by local authorities, churches, or underground networks, offering watery broth that sometimes contained nothing more than boiled grass or scraps. Lines formed at first light, hundreds waiting in silence, breath clouding like smoke. The soup was hot, that was something, a woman later wrote in her diary, but it filled the stomach for only an hour. Technology played no heroic role here. No advanced weapons turned the tide, only human ingenuity born of desperation. Tulip bulbs, once symbols of beauty, were ground into flour for bitter pancakes or porridge that caused severe cramps but provided calories. Sugar beets were boiled for hours into a sweetish mush. People foraged nettles, dandelion leaves, even cat food if they could find it on the black market. Furniture vanished piece by piece. Wooden chairs, doors, floorboards fed into makeshift stoves for fleeting warmth. Electricity and gas supplies dwindled to nothing. Homes grew as cold as the streets outside. Children, their growth stunted, played quietly or not at all, too listless to run. In one household, a father divided a single sugar beet among 5 people. Each slice chewed slowly, savoring what little sweetness remained. Losses mounted quietly at first, the elderly slipping away in their beds from heart failure or pneumonia, bodies too frail to fight infection. Then came the young, infants unable to nurse because mothers produced no milk, toddlers wasting into skeletal forms. Bodies appeared on streets, wrapped in sheets or old coats, collected by volunteers who pulled carts like grim reapers. By February 1945, the coldest month, deaths peaked. Thousands succumbed to starvation-related causes, though exact numbers varied in records. One estimate placed famine deaths around 20,000 overall, but the suffering touched millions. "My brother just lay down one day and didn't get up," a man recalled years later, voice cracking at the memory. Heroics emerged in small, everyday acts. Neighbors slipping an extra potato under a door, families hiding Jewish children and sharing their meager portions, underground groups organizing secret distributions despite patrols. A young girl in Rotterdam traded family jewelry for bread, walking alone through checkpoints to bring it home. Twists came with rumors, Allied forces advancing, food aid promised, but weeks passed with no relief. The frozen canals, once arteries of supply, became skating rinks for the able-bodied who searched for anything to burn or eat. Black market prices soared. A loaf cost a fortune in valuables, yet even money lost, meaning when nothing was for sale. March brought no thaw in hunger. Rations hovered near 300 calories. People ate tulip bulbs by the thousands. Over 7,000 tons ground up that winter, leading to widespread dysentery. Edema swelled legs and faces, a cruel mockery of fullness. One diary entry captured the despair. "We are shadows now, moving through a world that has forgotten us." Commas in the halting sentences, pauses where hope flickered and died. Yet survival continued through community. Central kitchens produced national soup from whatever arrived, sometimes Red Cross parcels delayed by bureaucracy. Volunteers risked arrest to forage or trade. As April dawned, the turning point approached. Negotiations, fragile and tense, began between Allied commanders and German authorities. The breakthrough came on April 28 to 30th, 1945, with agreements allowing safe passage for aid. Operation Manna launched on April 29th. RAF bombers, followed by USAAF and Operation Chowhound, flew low over drop zones in The Hague, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, fields marked with white crosses or food painted large. Thousands of tons of food, chocolate, biscuits, flour, milk powder, rained down in sacks. Crowds gathered, weak but cheering, as packages parachuted or free fell. "The sky opened and food fell like manna," one witness described, tears in her eyes. Children ran to collect what they could, faces alight for the first time in months. Ground convoys followed under Operation Faust. Canadian and British trucks rolled in from liberated areas, carrying 1,200 tons daily for 9 days. The first trucks arrived in early May, greeted by gaunt faces and quiet gratitude. Bodies began to regain strength slowly. Hospitals filled with those recovering from malnutrition. Liberation arrived on May 5, 1945, as German forces surrendered in the West. The famine's grip loosened, not instantly, but with each delivery, each meal. The climax was not a battle won with guns, but humanity's quiet refusal to abandon the starving. Twists of diplomacy and mercy, after months of engineered deprivation, brought the end. Losses remained etched in memories, families broken, health scarred for life, but the story shifted from survival alone to recovery shared. The airdrops of late April 1945 marked a dramatic turning point when hope, long starved, finally received sustenance from above. On April 29th, the first RAF Lancasters roared over designated zones, releasing bundles that floated down on parachutes or tumbled freely. Tins of Spam, chocolate bars, condensed milk, flour sacks splitting on impact. Civilians, many barely able to stand, rushed forward despite weakness, gathering what they could amid cheers mixed with sobs. "It was like Christmas falling from the sky," a Rotterdam resident recalled. "We cried as we ate." American B-17s joined in Operation Chowhound from May 1st, dropping even more, over 11,000 tons combined in both operations. The agreement held. German troops stood aside. No anti-aircraft fire disrupted the mercy flights. Ground relief accelerated with the Achterveld Agreement of April 30th, enabling Operation Faust, trucks laden with Canadian and British supplies crossing into the West. For 9 days, convoys delivered thousands of tons, distributed through local networks to soup kitchens and homes. Rations began to rise. Bodies responded slowly. Swollen limbs receded. Strength returned in increments. The lesson etched deepest was the cost of weaponized hunger. How blockades and reprisals could devastate civilians far from battle lines, leaving generational scars. Studies later showed survivors faced higher risks of diabetes, heart disease, schizophrenia, effects passing even to offspring conceived during the famine. Yet the resolution highlighted resilience. Communities that organized, shared, endured. Liberation on May 5th brought full Allied control, reopening supply lines. Food flowed freely again. Markets revived. The famine ended not with triumph, but with quiet healing. Meals eaten without fear, children gaining weight, families rebuilding. The ordeal taught that starvation's wounds heal slowly, but humanity's capacity to aid and recover endures. No victory parades erased the memories, but the deliveries restored life where death had hovered closest. The hunger winter faded slowly, like frost melting under a reluctant spring sun, but its marks lingered long after the last food parcel landed and the last German soldier left. Streets that once echoed with the shuffle of hunger treks filled again with bicycles, trams, and the ordinary sounds of life resuming. Markets restocked. Children's faces lost their hollow look. Mothers could finally breathe without counting every crumb. Yet the winter of 1944 to 1945 did not vanish from memory. It settled into bones, into family stories passed down quietly at dinner tables, into medical records that tracked higher rates of heart disease, diabetes, and mental health challenges among those who had been conceived or carried through those starving months. Researchers later called it the Dutch Hunger Winter Study, one of the clearest windows science has ever had into how severe malnutrition in early life or even before birth can echo across decades and generations. A child born in early 1945, weighing far less than normal, might grow up healthy on the outside, but carry invisible changes in metabolism, stress responses, even gene expression. Commas in the medical charts, pauses where life had almost stopped. The famine showed something deeper too. How quickly abundance can turn to absence when supply lines are severed by design or by war. Cities built on trade and import, suddenly cut off, revealed their fragility. People learned never to take a full plate for granted. Many survivors, decades later, still scraped every last bit from a dish, folded napkins carefully, or kept a small stock of non-perishables just in case. They taught their grandchildren the same quiet habits, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they had endured. The event also left a lasting lesson about civilian endurance in modern conflict. When battles move to the skies and supply routes, the people left behind become the front line without weapons. The hunger winter was not won with tanks or infantry charges. It was survived through small kindnesses, sharing a potato, carrying a neighbor's child, organizing a soup line under curfew. It was ended by diplomacy that, for once, placed humanitarian need above military advantage. The agreements that allowed Operation Manna, Chowhound, and Faust to reach the starving West. Those airdrops and truck convoys were not flashy victories, but they were mercy in motion. Proof that even in the final days of a brutal war, agreements could be reached to feed the helpless. Today, the story is studied in classrooms, remembered on anniversaries, preserved in museums with displays of tulip bulb grinders, patched bicycle tires, and faded ration cards. It stands as a warning. Famine can be engineered, and when it is, the cost is measured not only in lives lost, but in futures quietly diminished. At the same time, it remains a testament to human stubbornness in the face of engineered suffering. The refusal to disappear entirely, the instinct to share the last bite, the quiet hope that kept people walking one more kilometer toward a possible potato. The Netherlands rebuilt, prospered, remembered. And in that remembering lies perhaps the truest resolution. Never again let hunger become a weapon. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video. And we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. If this story moved you, like the video, comment your thoughts below. What surprises you most about the hunger winter? Subscribe for more forgotten WW2 stories that history often overlooks. See you in the next WW2 story.